What is up, people of YouTube? I'm your host Vernon. This is Veteran Memorial Park Pond. Let's fish that. Alright, ladies and gents, it is nearly mid of January and I haven't gone fishing at all yet, so I think it's about time we get on some fish. So rather just me going out catching some fish, I want to put something in a video that's helpful to other people. And as luck would have it, one of my viewers reached out to me telling me about watching my videos for almost a year and finally getting his first fishing rod this Christmas. And rather excited, he went out to do some fishing and went an entire day and didn't catch any fish out there. So he reached out to me and asked what he's doing wrong. Now, I don't think this viewer is doing anything wrong. Sometimes it's just very tough to find fish out there. But rather than me just catching fish, I want to have a look at what it is I'm doing out there. So let's see if we get some fish. Alright, so how do I pick a particular spot? Now, sadly, we humans tend to stick to what we know. We are creatures of habit, and I've caught more fish on this side of the pond than the other side. That's why I'm always coming to this side. And for me, because of the direction of the sunlight, I choose this particular side. But when it comes to the fishing, it does not actually matter. You'll see there's people all around the pond, and everyone everywhere is catching fish. That is because fish are moving around. Now, sometimes they'll stick in one particular spot, but more often than not, the fish will be moving around, so the particular spot you're choosing is not that important. What is important is thinking about the fish and where they'll be and what they would be doing. Now, in a lake or a pond with lots of structure, the fish will be hiding in the structure, going away from the little cormorants there, but this particular pond does not have any structure in the water, so these fish will be heading into deeper water, putting as much distance between the predators and themselves. So around here, you want to try and get your baits into the deep water. That's why I'm selecting this little spot. There we have the little aerators. That's a little deep hole. I'm going to try and get my baits out all the way there. Now, when we're talking about baits, I'm of course going to be using some power baits. I only have the lime twist flavor. I don't have many power baits on me. These things don't last the entire season. They do dry out, they stop working. So it's best to have some fresh ones, and this is the only fresh one I have. So that's what I'm going to be using out there today. But because you're never too old to learn anything, I want to improve on my normal way of just throwing out some power baits. Now, you all remember Steven. Back when I went to Lorenzi, we met Steven out there. He actually gave me an idea. I'm going to steal his idea of using a little marshmallow. Now, unfortunately, I don't have marshmallows, but I do have these little oozes, marshmallow type of thing. So I'm going to be using them, and I'm going to be using normal Carolina rig with my tiny little hook. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to put a piece of the little oozer on the hook. And this is quite important. Marshmallows and these little oozers float. That's why I'm using a tiny piece. I want it to float because I'm going to put on the power bait, which also floats. But if you put on too much power bait, it's too big, the fish won't be able to eat it. They just peck at it and they pull it off the hook. That's why you need a smaller piece so they can actually swallow it. But if you put on too small a piece, it won't float. That's why I'm adding some buoyancy with the marshmallow and putting on the power baits. And there we have it, a little buoyant power bait. I'm going to throw that out there, let it soak, wait for some fish to find that. Alright, so we got our power baits out there, and I have a little bell on my rod tip there. Of course, the bell is optional. You don't need a little bell. I have that on there because I'm going to be busy with some other stuff, and sometimes I will miss a hit. That's why I have a little bell on there. But oftentimes you'll find that you're not getting any hits on the power baits. Now, normally when the fish are stocked, they're pretty good on finding the power baits and going for the power baits. But it's almost been a month since the last time they stocked the ponds. So the fish that are in here, they already learned not to trust power baits. Every time you catch a fish and you release it, that fish learns that not to trust those types of baits. So sometimes you won't get them on the power baits, but it's worth a try having one rod out there with some power baits. but of course you're allowed to use a second rod. And on the second rod, I'm going to be a little bit more active, trying to find if I can find any fish feeding or having a reaction to some lures or baits. So I'm going to start off with a little inline spinner. I love using a little inline spinner. You get a good feel if the fish are active or not, whether they are actively feeding. If they chase this little thing or you get constant hits, that means they're willing to feed. So for now, I'm going to make a couple of casts, swap up to different colors, see if we get any hits or any follows. And with the inline spinner, casting it out, letting it sink down a bit, and then just slowly retrieving it, waiting to feel any tug or pull. Alright, it's now been over an hour and I've been throwing around all sorts of different inline spinners. No hits on the inline spinners. Now sometimes they will go for moving baits, but when the water is this cold, even trout, that's a species of fish that actually prefer colder water, when it's this cold they won't even chase baits. You have to slow down your presentation. So not getting any hits on the little inline spinner, so I'll be moving over to a different technique to see if I find any fish. We also have been getting some hits on our power baits, but it's one tiny little tug and then nothing, and every time I reel in I see that the baits have been stolen. So maybe we need to rethink on how we're going to try and hook these fish if they're just stealing our baits off with that tiny little hook. But for now we're just going to keep rebaiting that one, casting it out. If they're willing to eat the power baits, I'm willing to throw it out there. But on the second rod I'm swapping over to a drop shot rig. All that is a little loop knot, one that I can exchange hooks on, and a little drop shot at the bottom, lifting the baits out of all the grass and muck. And the hook I have on here at the moment, I'm going to use some power eggs, see if I can get any fish on that. But I'm only going to make a few casts like that and swap out to some power worms. I'm thinking the power worms might do the trick better. Slow moving little worms on the bottom.
Much later.
Alright, ladies and gents, a couple of hours, we finally have a fish on. Let's quickly get the net for this guy. Quite a lively, feisty little guy. And there we go. Our first fish for the year of 2023 landed. Nice decent little stocker trout. Let's quickly get that hook out. Alright, so we got our first little trout for the year landed. Quickly just want to have a look at this little fish before we let him go. Remember, when handling trout, always to wet your hands first. We don't want the oil on your hands to damage the slime layer on these fish. And there we go. Decent sized stocker. One of the bigger ones I've seen today. I've seen quite a lot of smaller ones, but this nice size one. Right, so not planning on keeping any fish, so we're going to get this one back to the water, and off he goes. Hopefully someone can catch him again. Took something like 5 hours throwing all the little inline spinners I have, all the worms I have, and some power baits, and finally we managed to get a fish. Now I've been struggling quite a lot, but some of the other people around, they've been catching quite a few. But that's the thing, spending lots of time here, figuring it out. That's how you get more, that's how you figure out what baits to use. But I'm happy to be on the board with my first fish for 2023. Alright, ladies and gents, between some power baits and some power worms, I actually managed to lose 5 fish out there, but we did finally get on our first fish for the year. And like I said in the beginning of this video, the idea of this video was more to show you of what it is I'm doing to get fish rather than just me catching some fish. Now don't get me wrong, I like the idea of people watching my videos to start fishing, but by no means am I an expert. I'm just a normal guy going out there doing some fishing. So when it comes to catching the fish out there, I don't have a bigger chance of catching them. In fact, there were a lot more people out here catching fish. I did quite find it a bit of a struggle today. And I have to say the people catching the fish out there, whilst talking to them, some of them said they're using some Colby cheese, some said garlic flavored power baits, and a big favorite out there seems to be little marshmallows. I think the sweetness in the marshmallows that draws in the fish. But all of these things are different from the normal power baits. And that's the thing, when you get out there a lot, you can experiment and find the right baits that the fish want. So to answer the question of the viewer, what are you doing wrong? Well, most likely you're not doing anything wrong. It is after all called fishing, not catching. It took me something like 4 tries before I caught my first trout out here, so it does take a couple of goes before you get the hang of it, figure out how to move the lures, or exactly how to cast, or how to properly put your baits on the hooks. That is unfortunately something that I cannot teach. That's something you only pick up when you're actually out there doing these types of things. Once you get the hang of it, it will get easier. Now please do understand, I'm saying it will get easier, not easy. It's still difficult to find fish. You have to be in the right place, right time, right baits. And once you think you figured it out, it all changes. New season, new fish, new places to find them. But I do hope this video is helpful to someone out there at least. Please do give me a little thumbs up, show your support. And if you've not yet subscribed to the channel, consider doing so, hitting the big red subscribe button, joining my community. Alright guys, but if you have any hints or tips or would like to give some advice, go down in the comments. Feel free to ask any questions down there as well. But I want to thank you guys for following, and like always, I'll see you next time.